Hello, welcome to Frequencies, tuning in to frequencies of human behavior, perspective, and empathy. I have a question. What is music? If you had to describe music to a being from another planet, how would you do that? You can't really hold it, you can't touch it, you can't see it or smell it, yet somehow it can move us to tears, stir memories, and connect us to something beyond words. How is that possible? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, but I've spent a lot of time trying to craft my own answer, and it's led me to think about how our concept of music has evolved. From the complex, sprawling compositions of the classical era, all the way down to today's 3-minute, 4-chord memory capsules. I'll explain that here shortly. Songs somehow hold the power to take us back in time, maybe even into the future. In this episode, I'll share a bit of my own experience with music, a couple of the superpowers that made me realize there's something much deeper going on. We'll also explore the idea that music might truly be the key to the universe, just as Tesla once suggested when he said, "The secrets of the universe are found in frequency and vibration." I love that quote, by the way. It's a concept that runs through the DNA of this show, from the name itself to the visual themes that draw on cymatics, those incredible geometric patterns created by vibration and sound. If you saw the last episode, you know I had some technical hiccups. If you watch the video version of the show, at least, I typically have some cymatics playing on the little monitor behind me, which, if you're watching now, you'll see that they're not there. Just having some technical difficulties. It's all minor, part of the process, but we'll get that fixed soon. But the fascination is real. The beauty of sound made visible by sand organizing itself into intricate, coordinated dances. It's mind-blowing to me. I love it. I bought this little cymatics machine that kind of plays individual frequencies through Bluetooth, or kind of I can hook it up from the computer, have control over what frequency it's playing, volume, and it's pretty cool. It makes all the cool cymatic patterns. I loved messing with it. It was a fun little, I don't want to call it a toy, but it was a fun little project to get involved with. Some believe ancient civilizations actually used cymatic patterns as blueprints for temples and monuments. We'll dive into a few of those stories as well. Then we'll strip everything back, just as we always do. Get primal with it. No instruments, no technology, and think about the voice as our original superpower. Could we still have the ability to influence the world around us using only sound? Maybe. We'll touch on the research of Kai Dickens and her telepathy tapes project, exploring the extraordinary communication skills of nonverbal autistic individuals. And from there, we'll venture into a sweeping idea that what if, and it's a big what if, I promise it's a fun one, but what if language itself, written and spoken, is what made us lose certain innate abilities we had once? Well, it's a fun one, I promise. That thread will take us straight into the realm of human consciousness. I'll consider myself a newbie when it comes to learning about our human consciousness, but I'm all in. I love it. But I'll be connecting consciousness to the pioneering work of Robert Monroe and his binaural beats and hemisync technology. His experiments help people access deeper states of awareness and tap into the parts of the mind we've long forgotten how to reach. All of this, the emotion, the science, the mystery, comes together on this episode. The magic of music and frequencies. Let's tune in. let's get into it. So what is music? How would you describe a song to a being from another planet? I absolutely love this question. It gets right to the heart of something we take for granted. As a songwriter, it's a question that came to me during a serious case of writer's block. I started thinking about how strange it is that the thing I'm creating is completely intangible, yet it can carry so much power and value. You can't hold it, you can't see it, you can't smell it, but somehow it exists as this invisible force made from ideas, tones, and frequencies layered over one another, chords forming phrases, phrases forming patterns, all performing this delicate dance between our ears, literally floating through the air. The more I thought about that, the more it blew my mind. And since that came out of writer's block, I should probably admit how that started. And I'd take my guitar out into nature and try to find a quiet spot with a little privacy and see what came out. I called it idea harvesting, going out into nature and kind of letting the creative ideas come to me. I felt like it was a better place to kind of be an antenna, if you will, for these creative ideas. I had some success with it, but privacy is tough to find in the city. And songwriting isn't clean or graceful by any means, when it begins at least. You strum nonsense, you mumble disconnected words, you chase fragments of melody that make no sense. And that's the real process. Sometimes inspiration strikes fast. Sometimes you've heard of artists saying these songs just wrote themselves. I've had a couple of these. And when it happens, it's amazing. It's just unbelievable. It's so rewarding, and just the ideas just come to you, and you're just this antenna, and just things come straight to you. But most of the time, it doesn't happen like that. It's messy. And when you're in public with people walking by, hearing every awkward half lyric or off key note, yeah, it's not ideal. It's a little bit embarrassing sometimes. So, I remember getting jealous of painters and illustrators, artists that could sit quietly and practice in private, sketch in total silence. But music, we project straight out into the world. You can't hide sound. It travels, and for some reason, people always want to come investigate. People always come around when they hear music. I mean, curiosity takes over every single time. I'd find these little quiet spots. Nobody's around. I park the car, wait 5-10 minutes. Not a single car drives by. I get out of the car, get the guitar up on a rock or on a chair, whatever. Get the guitar out and look around. It's good. Sure shit, 5-10 minutes later, somebody's driving by and they are staring. And you could see their wheels turning, like, I wonder what he's doing. They park and they go for a walk. I mean, who am I? It's not my park. I get it. This happened over and over again. I could tell you multiple stories of this. Is what it is. It's funny now, but at the time drove me insane. The frustration led me to think more deeply about music itself, how it's evolved. I've always loved classical music. Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, Vivaldi, just pure geniuses, masters. The complexity, the structure, the emotion. It's hard to comprehend how their minds worked. Those compositions were intricate, lengthy, and demanded deep concentration from both the artist and the listener. Today's music, by comparison, is much simpler, more repetitive, and shorter. And I don't think that's bad. I really don't. It's just different. But I do wonder how we got here. It's a good possibility. It's for the same reason that people aren't really going to movie theaters. The short form clips online have completely dominated the entertainment industry. Our attention spans have shifted. Audiences lean toward quick hits of emotion or entertainment. And that shapes how songs are written and produced. What sells. If it sells, then people are going to replicate what sells. Obvious. Might be the natural evolution of art in a fast-paced world, but part of me longs to experience, what our ancestors did, sitting in a small hall, surrounded by sound, like every note played live by a musical virtuoso, if you will, just pulling pure emotion out of wood and string. It would have been pretty nice. I would die to experience that again. But today, music connects to us in a different way. I think it's tied to moments, experiences, memories, events. I think that's where its real visibility comes from. A certain song hits during a specific time in your life. Could be a death of a friend, a funeral, a breakup, a perfect summer night. And that song plays, it comes on, and it just becomes the key to that memory. Every time you hear it from that point on, you're transported back in time to that. That's why I call them memory capsules. I do. I love the concept of it. I think it makes total sense, at least for me. I'll explain a little bit more here shortly. But as a musician, I think I listen to music a little differently. Usually I hear the melody first, and then I'll kind of start isolating instruments as I listen along. I'll take the drum, I'll focus on the drum beat maybe, and then the bass line. Every song's different. Depends on what kind of stands out to me. Maybe it's the weird little guitar phrase, or maybe the vocals, a harmony. I'm a sucker for good harmonies, always. But I start breaking it apart before stepping back to take in the whole energy. Lyrics usually come last for me, unless there's like a phrase or something that just grabs me. But for most listeners, I think it's the reverse. I think to the common music listener, I mean no offense by that, but I think to the general music listener that they take that emotional impact first. They take the overall composition and kind of feel the energy of the song, versus me that kind of analyzes these. I start picking it apart. But when you take in that emotional impact first, I think that's what kind of seals that moment in time. Not to say that the songs I don't have the ability to capture those songs in those times, because it happens often. I'll get into that shortly. But I think that's honestly just the power of music. Something you can't see, touch, or hold, but it becomes one of the strongest emotional triggers we have. Invisible, but unforgettable. All right, story time. I want to kind of elaborate on a couple of things I mentioned a little bit ago. So I want to share a little bit about my own history with music. It's always been a big part of my life, even going back to middle and high school. Most of the friend groups I was a part of, back then at least, revolved around our shared love of music. That passion eventually led to starting a band. I don't necessarily want to get too deep into those details at the moment, but one thing I will say, and this is something I strongly encourage everyone to do, and that's to at least try to learn an instrument or sing. I think everybody should at least try. Do it for yourself, sure, but also for the experience of collaboration. There's really nothing like performing music with another person. When you're playing in sync, following the same rhythm, hitting the same cues, it's almost telepathic. And when voices come into play and you start learning to sing and harmonize with another human being, in my opinion, that's one of the most intimate, creative experiences you can have with another person. Not in a romantic way, but I guess it very well could be. But it's just a deep, shared connection that's hard to explain until you felt it. Music's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. In my teens and 20s, going to concerts was a huge part of my social life. Live music was a high point, the ultimate shared moment between me and my buddies. Sure, we had backyard parties and bonfires with music always in the background, but the live shows were it. And this ties into something I've talked about before, and I'm going to talk about it again, I'm sure, and that's my relationship with alcohol. Music and booze. They were like best friends, and I was the third one in the group. We did everything together, especially at concerts. Looking back, the drinking almost became the main event with the music as the backdrop. And to be perfectly honest, it was the pre-gaming that really kind of got out of hand. And it's because alcohol made me feel normal. It made me confident and carefree, like I could truly enjoy the experience. That's what I thought, at least. Then when I got sober in 2019, it felt like one member of the trio got kicked out. Then right after that, the pandemic hit. No concerts, no social gatherings, nothing. Meanwhile, home drinking was becoming trendy and normalized. And that was my bread and butter, honestly. That honestly was my specialty. I'm kind of ashamed to admit it. I was never a bar guy. I mean, I played music, yes, but I drank at home, and I love drinking at home. And honestly, if I kept drinking through the pandemic, I don't think I'd be here today. It was that bad. But that's not how it went. I got sober. I made it through the first year with no live music, no crowd energy, just silence. Eventually, when concerts started to come back, I decided to face that fear and go to a show. The artist was Benjamin Todd, and if you don't know his work, I highly recommend it. You should totally check him out. He writes a lot about recovery and redemption. Excellent songwriter. Go check him out. So I'd go to his concert. I was super nervous, and during the first song, when I knew well, I went to sing along, and then suddenly, I felt this massive rush of emotion in my chest. I go to start singing, and I get this quiver. I couldn't control it, man. It was crazy. Like my throat locked up, and I couldn't sing. Instead, I start crying, just start bawling, tears rolling down my eyes. My voice was just choked up. I didn't expect it at all. And it happened multiple times throughout the show. It was totally caught me off guard. I was not expecting it. And so, the show gets over, and then I don't know if it was that night, the next night, or sometime throughout that week, I started thinking about something that happened as a kid. I might have been 7 or 8, maybe 11. I think it was between 7 and 8. But I was like down in my room sitting at this little desk, and I remember Garth Brooks, I believe it was The Dance, but it may have been The River. And something happened. Like I'm just sitting there, and I remember singing it, and I remember just crying my eyes out singing the song, just bawling. A dream is like a river. I remember crying, and it was, I don't know why. Looking back, I remember thinking like it was a beautiful song. I remember that memory, that thought, but I just remember crying, and then I get done, the song gets over, and I just kind of turn the song off and pick up my toys and just start playing with my toys. It was such a strange little moment, especially as a little kid. I don't remember exactly why it happened. I just remember it happening vividly. And it was at that point I kind of realized I've always been this way. I've always been a crier. Alcohol dulled that sensitivity for years. Sobriety brought it back, real, raw. And I'm grateful for that. Every concert since then, it happens. The singing turns into crying. The quiver comes along, and people fucking start looking at me and like, dude, you okay? And I'm, yes. I'm fucking, I got tears in my eyes. I'm like, I'm fine. I promise. It really is a good cry. It's so hard to explain. I'm not embarrassed about it. And it makes it, I wish I could sing. Like, I like singing that song, and like the emotion just takes over. I can't explain it. It's kind of like a superpower. That's what I call it. And it's not necessarily my superpower. It's what the music does to me. But just feeling pure emotion so deeply that it breaks through physically. It also made me think about, back in the day, I'd see videos of usually teenage girls or young girls watching the Beatles and Elvis for the first time and just seeing them crying their eyes out, in the crowd. And I remember thinking to myself, why are they crying? What is happening? Makes sense. I get it now. I totally get it now. Something else. So that's one kind of thing that has affected me. I call it a superpower, but like I said, it's really what the music does to me. The second one is a little bit more quieter, but just as powerful. For every song that has ever hit me deeply, that I've really liked, that's kind of struck a chord somehow, some way, whether it's good or bad or sad, whatever, I can remember exactly where I was, not just physically, but emotionally. The phase of my life I was in when I first heard that song. If that makes any sense. It's like an instant map of my own history. Each song becomes like a timestamp or a portal to a version of myself that once existed. It's pretty cool, honestly. Since I got sober, I got a playlist of probably damn near 1,000 songs. Specifically, after I got sober, I can definitely remember these songs because they were hitting me at different times, and I can remember, oh yeah, that's around the time and blah 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 happened. But then even going back, the song, it's happened to so many musics. I can remember who played it for me, where I was, what was going on. I think it's pretty cool. That's why I call them memory capsules. Each one holds a moment, an emotion, a story, invisible but permanent. And the more I think about it, and the more I realize music isn't just something we listen to, it's something that remembers us. So if you've been watching the video version of the show, you've probably noticed the strange geometric patterns, the imagery floating in the background behind me here, which you'll see today isn't there. Unfortunately, I've been having some technical difficulties trying to get that cymatics video up. It's a cymatics video that I shot with my little cymatic plate that I have. Creates cool imagery behind me. It creates those Mandela-looking shapes made of sand and lines and symmetry. Well, that's cymatics, if you haven't heard of it. Cymatics is basically what happens when you make sound visible. You take a plate or a membrane of some kind and sprinkle sand or another fine material on it, then run a pure tone or frequency through it. And as the surface vibrates, the sand organizes itself into these incredible, precise geometric patterns that change with each new note. Same thing if you use water. Water does it too, and the surface starts forming ripple shapes. Very complex with water, and the structures, they start matching the vibration and changing with the vibration. It's like watching music draw its own blueprint in real time. Super cool. Now, what fascinates me is how much these patterns look like sacred geometry, like the kinds of shapes we see carved into temples and chapels and old stone structures all over the world. Some researchers and historians have suggested that certain ancient builders may have used these kinds of patterns as inspiration or even as guides when designing their sacred spaces. And whether or not they're consciously using cymatics the way we define it today, they definitely seemed to understand that sound, space, and geometry are deeply connected. There's some old temples where specific pillars ring like tuned instruments when you tap them, and stone rooms designed so that a single voice can fill an entire chamber with almost no effort, a whisper, if you will. Some staircases and columns seem to sing back a certain tone. It makes you wonder, were these spaces intentionally built to harmonize with particular frequencies? Were they designing architecture as an instrument? Something you don't just look at, but literally play with sound? I think so, to be honest with you. If you're ever wanting to explore these structures, you should look them up. And there's a couple. There's the Dwara Jain Temple in India, built in the 11th, 13th century, has these dome ceilings, really complex bands of intricate carvings on this carved dome ceiling. looks a lot like water cymatic patterns. There's another temple in India, in Hampi, India, called the Vitala Temple. It's known for its musical pillars. This features like ceiling carvings that resembles more cymatic patterns, more ceilings. A lot of the round ceilings, the domes, is where you can find these things, and they're typically carved into stone. Usually very symmetrical, just extremely complex. Totally look like cymatics. Very cool. There's the Hera. I'm gonna totally butcher this one. I know I butchered the other ones too, but the Hera Shwara temple. Sorry. It's a Hindu temple in India, in the Karnataka state, built 1223, 1224 CE, and the columns in this temple look like sound waves. Like if you were looking at sound waves on a plane and going left and right, stood them straight up and down. That's what it looks like. Super cool. There's a bunch of Tibetan temples as well that have often been cited having architectural designs intended to amplify acoustic resonance for rituals. Totally validating that they probably understood the principles of cymatics and sound. The shape of rooms matter tremendously when it comes to sound frequency. You can also look at Gothic cathedrals, European Gothic cathedrals. In the States, you can see them too. The round windows of stained glass, the rose windows. If you look at the complex patterns in those as well, very well could be reflected from cymatics. And obviously it's geometry as well, but you can overlay cymatic patterns over a lot of them, and they are very similar. Very cool stuff. One of my favorite stories connected to this idea is the Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. It's inside this chapel. There's like 213 little carved cubes arranged along the arches going through different paths in the chapel. And each one has a little pattern on it. It's carved into these little blocks. And for a long time, nobody really knew what they meant. And then this father and son team, and one was a musician and the other one kind of a code breaker, spent years studying these carvings and realized the patterns looked a lot like geometric shapes produced by vibrating sand, cymatics. They matched the visual patterns to specific musical pitches and intervals, and essentially treating the chapel like a stone music score. From that, they transcribed it, and they transcribed the cubes into a full music composition, a piece of music that had been literally carved into the building for centuries. And then they performed it. They performed the song that they transcribed from the cubes in the chapel arches. And they played it inside of the chapel, letting the space hear the song. Like, there's a video of it online. You can look it up, and extremely cool. They had I think a choir come and perform the music that they wrote, transcribed from these small cubes. Super cool story. The Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. Highly suggest looking up that story. Very cool story. But stories like that and all the strange acoustic tricks hidden in old temples and cathedrals that make it hard to shake the feeling that music and frequency have real, powerful properties. Not just emotionally, but physically. They shape matter. They shape spaces. And maybe they shape us. Now, but before we get too lost in the technology and the stone, the science, I want to strip it all back. Let's get primal with it, baby. Like we do. Forget the speakers, forget instruments, forget the recording gear, even forget electricity. Take all that away, every modern distraction and every tool we've built around sound. What are we left with? Our voices, right? Well, our voices are pretty freaking cool, not gonna lie. Even before you get into trained singers with insane control and range, just the basic human voice is wild when you really think about it. People who put the time to develop their singing skills are harnessing something incredibly powerful for sure. But I honestly believe way more people have the ability to sing well than we like to admit. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I think fear and self-consciousness stop a lot of people from really opening up and sharing their voices. And that's fine. I get it, but let it out. I think if you think you can sing, do it in front of somebody and just see what happens. Let it go. like Elsa said, let it go. But most of us at least have the ability to speak, right? From the moment we're born, when people are in our faces repeating, mama, dad, say mommy, daddy. You say it, say mommy, daddy. I mean, it's pounded in us, trying to kickstart that verbal engine. Spoken language really becomes the primary way we connect, explain, argue, comfort, and tell stories. Think of the amount of processing power it's using up, though. Think about it. Like, it's a lot, right? But not everyone has access to that channel. Now, I said I often like to get primal with things, and as you have noticed, this is true. But oftentimes while analyzing things, if you consider the opposite of that thought, you'll often get some pretty interesting responses and perspectives and thoughts on those ideas. For example, some people, especially those with more severe forms of autism or other neurological and physical conditions, they can't speak verbally at all. A few years ago, an excellent podcaster and researcher named Kai Dickens and her team released a project called the Telepathy Tapes. You probably heard of it. It's an amazing podcast. Go check it out. They spend a lot of time working with nonverbal autistic kids and adults. And the stories that came out of that research were nothing short of just mind-bending. Some of these individuals seem to communicate telepathically with one another, describing these meetings on the hill through what sounds like astral projection and sharing information in ways that doesn't really fit our normal spoken language box. There were reports of other abilities too, things that push right up against the edge of what we think is possible. Amazing stuff. Telepathy Tapes, look it up. But that got my brain spinning, like, what if, and it's a big one, but what if when humans doubled down on building this giant dictionary of words and grammar and strict language rules, we accidentally turned down the volume on another channel in the brain? What if we traded in some older, more direct form of communication, something like telepathy, shared imagery, or emotion-based broadcasts, for a more practical but more limited system of nouns and verbs and sentences and structure? It's a wild idea, I know, but I can't help but wonder and hope, honestly. Communication, there's so many ways people can get disconnected and not be on the same page with simple communication. It's really frustrating for some, myself included. But I know it's a wild one. I really do. I know I'm not the first one to really play with these fun kinds of theories. There's a bunch of them out there. I recently stumbled onto something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or linguistic relativity. Very cool theory. It's, in simple terms, it suggests that the language you speak doesn't just describe your reality, it actually shapes how you see reality. Think about that. The structure and vocabulary of your native language influence how you perceive, categorize, and even feel the world. Different languages, different mental worlds. It absolutely melted my brain when I first heard it, because I think it's got some solid ground. There's languages that don't have a word for snow. They have no idea what snow is. Obviously, geographical and financial limitations, but what is their brain thinking? It's a very interesting concept to think about. Even if it's partly true, it opens up a huge question. What would our reality feel like without spoken language at all? If we never built these elaborate verbal systems, what other mental tools would we have evolved or preserved? Would we be more tuned into subtle emotional signals, energetic exchanges, or nonverbal forms of knowing? I love sitting with that what if. It's a new one, fairly new to me. I haven't dedicated a ton of time to it, but I think it's such a fun one. Now, we obviously can't rewind time and delete English or toss out all the weird rules and silent letters. We're here with the languages we've got. But once you start looking into human consciousness, how the brain, perception, and reality all interact, you start to realize the box is way bigger than we've been taught. The voice might not just be about sound coming out of the mouth. It might be one surface level expression of something much deeper our consciousness is doing underneath. And that's where I want to go next. If language shapes reality and frequency shapes matter, what happens when we start using sound and intention together on purpose? So, I should probably acknowledge something here. I've spent almost 45 minutes talking about music without really talking about music, and not in the usual way, at least. If you know me in real life, that's probably a little confusing because I can go on and on for hours about bands and albums and riffs and lyrics and production, music history, all of it. So to take one of my deepest passions and approach it from this sideways angle, frequencies, memory, consciousness, wasn't exactly what I pictured when I first thought up this episode. But, honestly, I kind of love where it's gone, and I hope it's been at least a little bit eye-opening for you too, because I really believe music is even more magical than most of us realize. To make that point, I want to bring in somebody whose work completely changed how I think about consciousness and sound. Robert Monroe, and the team he built at what became the Monroe Institute. If you've never heard of him, look him up. His story is amazing. He started out in the world of radio and sound engineering, very grounded, very practical. Then he began having spontaneous out-of-body experiences, not once, but repeatedly. And instead of dismissing them, he decided to study them. He spent the rest of his life exploring these altered states of consciousness and mapping out what he experienced. But Monroe didn't just chase this stuff for himself. He wanted to figure out how to help other people access similar states in a safe, repeatable way. That's where his background in sound came in. He and his team started experimenting with audio patterns and specific frequencies to gently guide the brain into different states, like deep relaxation, focused awareness, lucid dreamlike experiences, and what many would describe as astral projection or out-of-body states. Tom Campbell was part of this team, and a whole bunch of other people, brilliant minds, absolutely brilliant minds. One of the big tools that came out of this work is something called hemisync. I think it's hemisphere synchronization. It's where they it's talking about the two sides of your brain where it's built around binaural beats. And the basic idea is this: if you play one steady tone in one ear and a slightly different tone in another ear, say 200 hertz in one ear and 210 in another, your brain doesn't just hear the two tones. It also starts to perceive a third phantom rhythm at the difference between them, in this case 10 hertz. That 10 hertz isn't a sound in the air. It's a pattern generated inside your brain. So those different frequencies often fall into a range we can't consciously hear. Low brainwave ranges around 4 to 15 hertz, but they line up with states like deep sleep, meditation, creativity, focused attention. For example, I think like the Schumann resonance, if you know what the Schumann resonance is, it's a frequency that is buzzing at about, I'm looking it up here, 7, 8 hertz, and that's Earth's heartbeat. That's what the Schumann resonance is, pretty much. It's called a bunch of different things. I don't know what it scientifically is, but it's Earth's heartbeat. And you've got delta waves that are between like a 0.5 hertz to 4 hertz, really, really low tones. And those are good for deep sleep, physical repair, stress reduction. And you've got between 4 to 8 hertz, which are theta waves, which is good for deep relaxation, meditation, creativity, REM sleep. In between 8 and 12 hertz, you've got the alpha waves, which is good for relaxed alertness, calm focus, reduced anxiety. Super cool stuff. So Monroe's team would layer these subtle binaural patterns under more pleasant sounds like gentle waves, rain, or soft tones, and use them in a guided exercise. People reported easier access to deep meditation, out-of-body experiences, pain relief, emotional processing, and better sleep, all from laying down with headphones on. Super cool, right? Now, this is a super quick and dirty version here for sure. I'm probably butchering some of the finer technical points. If you want a clear, more detailed breakdown of how this works, I highly recommend checking out creators and researchers who specialize in this stuff. People who walk through the science, the brainwave charts, the protocols, all of it. But even at the basic level, the takeaway is extremely wild. Jordan Crowder over at the Conscious Observers podcast, he has an episode he just did not that long ago, did an excellent job of covering what it is, how it works, the benefits of it. He's dedicated way more time into it than I have. Very cool show, highly recommend it. But with nothing but carefully arranged sound, you can reliably shift human consciousness. You can calm the body, quiet the mind, access memories, process trauma, explore non-ordinary states, and even touch experiences people describe as spiritual without swallowing a single pill, just frequencies in your ear. To me, that absolutely reinforces the idea that music and sound are not just background noise for a commute or workout. They're tools, they're levers, they're ways of steering our nervous system and our inner world. And that's where I want to land this episode. Using music on purpose as more than just something playing in the car, using it to heal, to regulate, to connect, and to make our lives genuinely happier and healthier. That's really all I want to leave you with. Use your music, not just as background noise or as a distraction, but as something you engage with on purpose. You're probably already doing this to an extent, and you probably don't even realize it. But maybe some of the ideas from this episode can nudge you to use with even more intention, for healing, for processing, for connection. There's one last little thought I want to share, because I think it's a beautiful way to close this out. If you want evidence that music might actually help save us, just look around. Listen to what's being played across all the different platforms, and look who's listening to what. Think back to what I very biasedly call the best era of music, the 90s. Genres back then felt like rigid walls, at least in the early 90s, late 80s. And toward the late 90s, that's when music really grew tremendously. New genres were created. But earlier on, and even before the 90s, think about, what country was for. Country music. Country music was for, poor, rural, white kids. Rap and R&B was more for poor, inner city black kids. Now, these are stereotypes. They're stereotypes we were fed. I don't like them in any way, shape, or form. I don't say that to reinforce them at all either, but to point out how limiting they were. Fast forward to now, and those walls are crumbling. Genre lines are blurred. Collaborations are everywhere. Hell, I think Beyonce just put out a country album. And people are way more open to crossing those old divides. I see it in every genre, both ways. Racism absolutely still exists. It's far from utopia. But look at how normalized interracial relationships are today compared to just a couple generations ago. Look at how comfortable younger people are dating, loving, and building lives and families with someone with a different skin color. I think music has quietly played a huge role in that. And when you grow up loving the same songs and the same artists and the same festival moments as someone who doesn't look like you, it's a lot harder to cling to the idea that you're fundamentally different. We're not. We're the same. I think that's absolutely beautiful. So here's my musical advice. Always seek out new music. Always. There's so much out there from every decade, every culture, every weird little corner of the internet. Don't just let algorithms spoon feed you. Go dig and build yourself playlists that are yours. Not just the pre-made mood mixes, although those can be pretty cool, but actually hand-picked collections. Sad songs that let you cry it out, road trip anthems that make the highway just feel like a movie, party tracks, poolside jams, campfire classics, and absolutely the classical playlists, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, all those old masters who were bending harmony and emotion centuries ago. Then go test this stuff out. Go out to a park on a nice day when you're stressed, find a nice quiet spot where the wind's blowing gently, birds are chirping, leaves are rustling. Put a piece of music that hits you in the chest. Just put it on your headphones, close your eyes, and just listen. If the tears show up, let it flow. That's the whole point. Because music is emotion. Music is love. Music is sadness. Music is rage. Music is memory. Music can carry a message bigger than any speech, unite people who have nothing in common on paper, and give us the courage to stand up against things we know aren't in humanity's best interest. Music is that powerful. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it maybe shifted the way you think about sound, frequency, and those little songs in your library. And I really hope you go out and find at least one piece of new music today that moves you. Because I'm convinced of this. Music heals the soul. Thanks for listening, friends. Please help engage with the show. It really does help. Share, comment, like, all that stuff. Thanks. Later.